What would you do if you stood on the edge, torn between your family's survival and your own pride? Can a simple act of kindness change everything? Liam never imagined that helping an elderly man with his groceries would lead him down a path that would challenge everything he thought he knew about strength, vulnerability, and pride. Life had always been tough for Liam and his mother. But when the rent was overdue and the landlord's threats grew more urgent, things took a turn for the worse. No matter how hard they worked, they never seemed to have enough. Could they escape the fear of losing it all? Then, John Walker appeared, a quiet man with a gentle kindness, seemingly out of place in a world full of harsh demands. He offered help, unconditionally. But could Liam's mother, Emily, swallow her pride and accept the help they so desperately needed? Being strong doesn't mean doing everything on your own, and accepting help doesn't mean failure, Mr. Walker's words echoed in Liam's mind. As Liam stood at the crossroads, one haunting question lingered. Would accepting help make them stronger or destroy them? Let's search for the answer together in today's story. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're tuning in from. Is it sunny or snowing where you are? If it's cold, make sure to bundle up, grab a cup of hot tea, and enjoy today's story with your loved ones. Stay healthy in the winter. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories to come. Liam sat by the window, staring out at the dimming sky, his mind heavy with thoughts he couldn't escape. It had been a tough year, one filled with moments of hope dashed by new challenges, one after another. Outside, the street was quiet as usual, but inside their modest apartment, the air was thick with worry. The weight of it all pressed down on him, but he tried to remain calm. He had to. For her, his mother, Emily, was his everything. A woman of quiet strength, she had raised him single-handedly after his father had passed away when Liam was just a boy. He could still remember the day they buried his father. Emily had held herself together through the funeral, her face a mask of grief, and then, as soon as they were alone, she had broken down in front of him. But even then, her resolve had been clear. She would do whatever it took to raise him right. Over the years, her unwavering determination had been the glue that held their small family together. But now, things were different. Emily worked long hours at a local diner, often coming home late, her hands sore from washing dishes and preparing meals for the steady stream of customers who came in. The tips were meager, but they helped pay for their bills. Sometimes, she would tell Liam stories of her customers, stories of their own struggles and triumphs. But even when her smile seemed genuine, Liam could see the tiredness in her eyes. The sparkle that had once defined her was slowly fading, replaced by the dull resignation that came from knowing that no matter how hard she worked, the money would never be enough. Their financial troubles were a constant shadow over their lives. Every month, Liam would watch his mother balance the books with the same meticulous care she gave everything else, but it was always the same story. Rent was overdue, the electricity bill was rising, and grocery prices kept climbing. The money she earned from the diner barely covered their necessities, and there was never any left for the things that could make life a little easier. There were days when Liam wondered how they would manage to keep the lights on, and nights when he heard the soft sobs of his mother as she tried to hide her frustration. He didn't tell her, but he could see it all. The weight on her shoulders, the way she tried to hide her exhaustion behind a smile. Liam knew his mother loved him more than anything, and he loved her just as deeply. But sometimes, he felt the crushing pressure of their circumstances and the fear that no matter how much they cared for each other, it wouldn't be enough to get them through. Liam had always tried to be strong for her, to be the kind of son who could lift some of the burden off her. But lately, the responsibility had become too much. He was still in school, trying to finish his senior year with enough credits to graduate. Between school and part-time work at a local convenience store, he barely had time to study, let alone think about his future. His grades had slipped, and it seemed like no matter how hard he worked, there was always something else to worry about. The future, once full of possibilities, now felt like a heavy fog, impossible to see through and even harder to plan for. But even in the darkest moments, Liam never stopped loving his mother. She was his rock, his reason for pushing through each day. No matter how tough things got, he could never give up on her. His deep love for Emily was the one thing in his life that remained unshaken. Even when he felt the sting of rejection from his peers, who lived in bigger houses and had better clothes, he knew his mother was the only one who truly understood him. She was the one who listened when he needed someone to talk to, and the one who held him when the weight of the world felt too heavy to carry alone. He knew that Emily worked tirelessly to make sure he had a chance at a better life. She never complained, never asked for help, even when she could barely stand. Her resilience was something that Liam had always admired, but it also made him ache with a deep sense of helplessness. He wished he could do more for her, to make things easier, to somehow take away the burden of worry that had become a permanent fixture in their lives. It was that love for her that kept him going, even when he thought he couldn't take another step. Liam wasn't sure how much longer they could keep living this way, but he promised himself he would do whatever it took to protect his mother. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, he would fight for their future. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her or watching her struggle any longer. As the days went by, the tension in their apartment only seemed to grow. Emily's exhaustion was becoming harder to hide, and Liam's own anxiety about their future was weighing on him more than ever. But in the midst of all the uncertainty, there was one thing he knew for sure. He loved his mother with all his heart, and no matter what came their way, he would never let her face it alone. With that thought, Liam turned away from the window and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be another day full of challenges, but as long as they had each other, he was determined to keep going. The rain had started to fall just as Liam was about to leave the convenience store for his shift. He pulled his jacket collar up, cursing under his breath as he sprinted for cover, hoping the storm wouldn't turn into a downpour. As he reached the corner of the block, he noticed a man struggling with an enormous stack of grocery bags, his hands shaking slightly from the weight. The elderly man seemed to be having a difficult time balancing the bags as he shuffled along the wet sidewalk, each step slow and deliberate. Without a second thought, Liam jogged over to him. "Hey, sir, can I help you with those?" Liam called out, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. The man looked up, his face crinkling into a smile. "Oh, thank you, young man. That would be a blessing." Liam took two of the heaviest bags from the man's hands, feeling the strain of the groceries as he adjusted his grip. They weren't just regular bags. They were filled to the brim with bottles of milk, cans of soup, bags of flour, and other household necessities. The weight of them made Liam's own shoulders ache a little, but he ignored it. The man, though older and frail, was clearly trying to make it back to his apartment without needing assistance. "I live just a block away," the man said, pointing toward a nearby building. "Couldn't have made it without you, son." "No problem at all," Liam replied, smiling. "I've got a little time before my shift. Happy to help." As they walked down the street together, the man introduced himself. "I'm John Walker. Everyone around here calls me John." "Liam," he said, shaking John's hand. "It's nice to meet you, John." They continued walking in companionable silence until they reached John's apartment building. Liam could see that it wasn't much. Old bricks and worn-out windows, the kind of place where people lived, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. But as they approached the door, John turned to him with a sudden twinkle in his eye. "Well, Liam," he said, "you've been such a good help. How about you come in for a quick drink? I'm not a fan of drinking alone." Liam hesitated. He had a shift to get to soon, but he didn't want to seem rude. "I don't want to keep you from anything," Liam said politely. "Nonsense," John insisted, waving his hand. "I'll be quick. I've got a few cold ones in the fridge and could use some company for a change. What do you say?" Liam was surprised by the warmth in John's voice, the kind of kindness he wasn't used to receiving. After a moment, he agreed. "Okay, just for a bit. But I really have to go soon." John led Liam into the building, using a set of keys to unlock a door on the second floor. The inside of John's apartment was modest, though it had a sense of homeliness. There were photographs on the walls, old family portraits, faded and worn, showing a time when John had been younger, surrounded by a family he seemed to hold dear. A simple sofa, a small kitchen table, and a few chairs made up the bulk of the furniture. But despite the simplicity, there was a warmth to the place that made Liam feel welcome. John gestured toward the couch. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll grab us a drink." Liam settled onto the couch, still feeling a little awkward. but John's easygoing nature made it easier to relax. As the old man pulled 2 cans of soda from the fridge, he continued speaking. "You know, Liam," John said, his voice low but firm, "I've lived in this neighborhood for a long time, long enough to see it all, the highs and the lows. And let me tell you, it hasn't always been easy. But the people here, the ones who stick around, they've got a way of looking out for each other. Doesn't matter how much you've got or don't have, it's about community, about helping one another." Liam listened, intrigued. He didn't know much about the community beyond the little he had seen at the convenience store and walking to and from work. His life was so consumed by his own struggles that he rarely noticed what went on around him. But John's words made him think. Maybe he wasn't the only one facing hardship. John handed Liam a can of soda, sitting down next to him in a worn armchair that creaked as he shifted. He took a long sip, letting out a sigh as if to relax into the moment. The air in the room seemed to settle, the sound of the rain now a gentle backdrop. "So, tell me about yourself, Liam," John said. "You've been working hard, I can tell. What's your story?" Liam hesitated. He wasn't sure how much he wanted to share with someone he'd just met, but John's kind, open expression made it easier to open up. He sighed deeply, then spoke. "It's just, life's tough right now," Liam admitted. "My mom's working 2 jobs just to make ends meet, and I'm trying to finish school and get a job to help out. But it feels like every time we take 1 step forward, something happens that pushes us 2 steps back. I just don't know how long we can keep going like this." John listened closely, his eyes thoughtful as Liam spoke. When he finished, John was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "You know, I've seen a lot of people go through tough times," John said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's never easy, that's for sure. But sometimes, we all need a little help to get through. You don't have to carry that weight on your shoulders alone." Liam's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this kind, direct offer of support from a complete stranger. He wasn't used to anyone offering help without some sort of catch. He shook his head, unsure of how to respond. "You don't have to do that, John. I'm sure you've got your own things to worry about." John held up his hand. "Liam, don't be proud. I know what it's like to struggle. I'm not offering this to make you feel bad, but because I believe in doing what's right. You don't have to carry this burden alone. If you need help, you let me know. There's no shame in it." The sincerity in John's voice touched Liam deeply. He didn't know if he was ready to accept help, but for the first time in a long while, the weight on his shoulders didn't feel so unbearable. "I'll think about it," Liam said quietly, meeting John's gaze. John smiled warmly. "That's all I ask. Just remember, you're not alone in this. You've got people who care, whether you know them yet or not." The conversation drifted after that, but the words stuck with Liam long after he left John's apartment. It wasn't just the offer of help that lingered, but the kindness John had shown. A reminder that, even in the hardest of times, there were people out there who cared enough to lend a hand. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air as Liam sat at the kitchen table, watching his mother carefully sift through the stack of bills. The room was dimly lit by the waning afternoon sunlight that filtered through the dusty blinds. It was a familiar scene. His mother, Emily, hunched over the kitchen table, going through the bills with a look of quiet determination. But Liam knew better than to mistake her stoic expression for calm. His mother had been through too much to let her emotions show easily. "Mom," Liam began softly, breaking the silence. "We can't keep doing this. The rent's due next week, and we still haven't saved up enough." Emily didn't look up from the bills but sighed deeply. "I know, Liam. I know. I've been trying. I've cut down on everything I can. But there's only so much we can stretch." Liam's chest tightened as he watched his mother. She was a woman made of steel, strong, resilient, but also worn down by years of struggle. She had raised him on her own, juggling 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. But no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed enough. Liam hated seeing her like this, especially when he knew that all her efforts were slowly eating away at her health. The exhaustion was visible in the bags under her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped as she moved through the house. And the weight of it all was starting to affect him too. He ran a hand through his messy hair, his mind spinning. It was a daily battle, a constant back and forth between hope and despair. For months, Liam had been looking for work, but the job Liam met was unforgiving. Every interview he went to ended in disappointment. Every rejection led her another blow to his self-esteem. He had hoped that things would get better once he graduated, but that dream now seemed as distant as ever. "You don't have to keep carrying all this on your own," Liam said, his voice breaking slightly. "Let me help. Maybe I can find something, anything. I'll take any job I can get." His mother finally looked up, her eyes soft but filled with the quiet sadness that Liam had seen so many times before. She shook her head slowly. "You've done enough, Liam. I won't have you working yourself to the bone like I have. You've got your whole future ahead of you. I'll figure something out." But Liam couldn't just sit back and watch. His mother had spent years sacrificing everything for him, for their family, and now she was too proud to accept any help. It made him feel helpless. He couldn't stand the thought of losing their home, the only place they had ever known, simply because they didn't have enough money. And the idea of watching his mother go without, sacrificing more than she already had, was unbearable. "Mom, I'm not going to let you do this alone," Liam insisted, his voice growing firmer. "You've already given so much, and I know it's hard for you to ask for help, but maybe it's time to accept it. We don't have to do this by ourselves." Emily stood up abruptly, shaking her head as if trying to ward off the heavy feelings. "I won't take charity, Liam. I won't let anyone think we can't make it on our own. I promised myself I'd never ask for help. You've got enough to deal with." Liam watched his mother, his heart breaking. He understood her pride. She had raised him on her own, and in doing so, had built a wall around herself, a wall that she would never let down, even when it was clear she was struggling. But now, the weight of that pride was suffocating them both. The doorbell rang, startling both of them. Liam pushed his chair back and walked toward the door, his mind still whirling with thoughts of what his mother had just said. Who could it be at this hour? He opened the door to find a familiar face standing there. Mr. Duncan, the landlord. "Good evening, Liam, Mr. Duncan said, a stiff smile on his face. "I'm here about the rent. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I'll need the payment by the end of the week." Liam felt his stomach churn. He had been dreading this moment. He had known for weeks that the rent was overdue, but hearing it out loud made it feel all the more real, like the ground beneath him was slowly crumbling. "We're doing everything we can," Liam said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I promise we'll have it by the end of the week. Just a few more days, okay?" Mr. Duncan didn't seem convinced. His eyes narrowed slightly as he scanned Liam's face, his gaze lingering for a moment too long. "I understand, Liam, but you've been a bit behind for a while now. You know I can't let things go for too long. If the rent isn't paid soon, I'll have to start looking into other options." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Other options meant eviction. Liam knew what that meant. He had seen it happen to other tenants in the building. Families forced out onto the street, their belongings piled up on the curb. He couldn't let that happen to his mother. "I'll get it to you," Liam said through gritted teeth, his mind racing for any way out of this mess. "We'll figure it out." Mr. Duncan gave a nod, his expression unreadable. "I'll be waiting, Liam. Take care." And with that, he turned and walked down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the quiet apartment building. Liam closed the door behind him, his hands trembling. He had known this day would come, but that didn't make it any easier to face. The pressure, the uncertainty, it was all too much to bear. He turned back to find his mother standing in the kitchen, watching him with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry," Liam said, his voice small. "I'll get the money, Mom. I'll figure something out." Emily didn't say anything for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want you to feel like you have to save us, Liam. You don't have to carry this burden. I can't bear the thought of you sacrificing your future for us." Liam shook his head, his throat tight with the weight of his feelings. "I'm not sacrificing anything, Mom. I'm just trying to help. I can't stand seeing you like this." There was a long pause as they both stood there, their words hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. Liam didn't know how they would get out of this. He didn't know where the money would come from or how he could fix everything. But he wasn't about to give up. He would fight for them, no matter what it took. That night, as Liam lay in bed, his thoughts spiraling with worry, he couldn't help but think of John, the old man who had offered him help without hesitation. Maybe he had been right. Maybe, for once, it was time to accept help from someone else. But asking for help wasn't easy. His pride, and his mother's, stood in the way. But one thing was clear. Something had to change. The night stretched on, and the weight of Liam's thoughts only grew heavier as he lay awake in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling above him. He couldn't shake the images of his mother, exhausted and defeated, staring at the pile of bills that seemed to mock their every attempt to survive. Each thought spiraled into another, a never-ending cycle of worry and anxiety. How were they going to make it? How could he keep his promise to his mother to protect her from the world's harshness when it felt like they were both being suffocated by it? He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the conversation with Mr. Duncan earlier in the evening. The landlord's words echoed in his ears. If the rent isn't paid soon, I'll have to start looking into other options. Other options. He knew what that meant. Eviction. His chest tightened just thinking about it. The idea of his mother, of their family, being cast out with nowhere to go, was a nightmare he couldn't bear. His thoughts turned back to John Walker, the elderly man he had met just a few days ago. John had offered him help, without hesitation, without a second thought. It wasn't a handout. It was an offer from someone who genuinely seemed to care. But now, lying there in the dark, Liam wasn't sure if he could accept it. The pride his mother had instilled in him, the same pride that had kept them going through the toughest of times, was a double-edged sword. Asking for help, even from someone like John, felt like admitting defeat. It felt like failure, and Liam couldn't bear the thought of disappointing his mother. But the more he thought about it, the more Liam realized that this wasn't about failure. It was about survival. The truth was, no matter how much he worked, no matter how many jobs he tried to get, it still wasn't enough. The bills kept piling up, the rent was overdue, and his mother's health was deteriorating from the stress. There were only so many hours in a day, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't keep up. Liam needed help. They both needed help. Sighing deeply, Liam sat up in bed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. He glanced at the clock on his nightstand. It was nearly 2 in the morning. He should be asleep. But sleep seemed impossible with the weight of everything pressing down on him. His phone lay on the desk beside him, and he found himself reaching for it without thinking. He opened the contacts list, scrolling down to John's name. His finger hovered over the call button for a moment, hesitating. What would his mother say if she found out? She would be furious. She had always told him that they didn't need anyone's charity. But in this moment, Liam couldn't see another way. He couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. With a deep breath, he tapped the button and dialed John's number. The phone rang several times before the line clicked, and Liam heard John's familiar voice on the other end. "Hello?" John answered, his tone warm and steady, as if he had been waiting for the call. Liam's heart raced, and he swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. "Mr. Walker? It's Liam. Liam Tanner. We met the other day. I hope I'm not disturbing you." No, John replied, his voice reassuring. "I'm glad you called, Liam. What's on your mind?" Liam took a deep breath, his palms sweating. He could feel his chest tightening with anxiety, but there was no turning back now. I didn't know who else to turn to. My mom and we're in a bit of a tough spot. The rent's overdue, and we're struggling to make ends meet. I don't know what to do. I've been trying to fix it, but I just don't have enough. I need help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Liam held his breath, waiting for a response, unsure of what to expect. Maybe John would change his mind. Maybe he would take back his offer. But then John spoke, and his words were filled with nothing but kindness. "Liam, I'm glad you called," John said gently. "You don't need to carry all this weight on your shoulders alone. I know it's hard to ask for help, but sometimes we all need a hand, especially when things get tough. You've done the right thing by reaching out. I can help." Liam felt a flood of relief wash over him, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear those words until they came. until they reminded him that there were still people out there willing to help, willing to care. "Thank you, Mr. Walker," Liam whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to say. I didn't think I could ask for help, but now I don't know what else to do." "You don't have to thank me, Liam," John replied. "We all go through tough times. And when you've got someone who cares, you lean on them. Don't hesitate to ask. That's what friends are for." Liam felt a lump form in his throat, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just about money. It was about pride, about family, about what it meant to accept help from someone else. And as hard as it was to admit, Liam realized that accepting help was a sign of strength, not weakness. It was an acknowledgement that sometimes we all need a little support to get through the hardest times. "Okay," Liam said finally, his voice steadier now. "We'll figure it out together. Thank you. I won't forget this." John chuckled softly. "No need for thanks, Liam. We're all just doing what we can. Now, don't worry. We'll take care of this. I'll be in touch with you soon, all right?" Liam nodded, even though John couldn't see him. "All right. I'll talk to you soon." The call ended, and for the first time in what felt like days, Liam felt a sense of peace. The knot in his stomach loosened. The constant pressure on his chest began to ease. He had made the call. He had taken the first step, and it was a step towards hope, towards the possibility of a brighter future. Liam laid back in bed, his eyes closing as exhaustion finally began to take over. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, he knew that. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't alone. And that thought gave him more comfort than anything else could. The following morning, Liam woke to the sound of his mother bustling around in the kitchen, the smell of coffee filling the air. For a moment, everything felt normal, quiet, routine. But as he sat up in bed, his mind immediately returned to the call he had made to John the night before. The memory of their conversation played over and over in his head, each repetition bringing both relief and a knot of anxiety. He had done it. He had reached out. And now, John had offered to help. But while Liam felt a deep sense of gratitude, there was still a gnawing worry inside him. His mother would never accept help from someone else, especially from a stranger. She'd raised him to be strong, to handle things on his own. The idea of accepting charity was something she would never consider lightly, and Liam couldn't shake the feeling that by accepting this offer, he might be betraying everything she had taught him about pride and independence. Pushing those thoughts aside, Liam got dressed and made his way to the kitchen, trying to shake off the anxious weight on his chest. He found his mother at the stove, her face illuminated by the soft morning light as she scrambled eggs, humming to herself. She didn't seem to notice him at first, her mind lost in the comfort of a familiar routine. "Morning, Mom," Liam said, trying to sound casual. His mother looked up, smiling warmly at him. "Morning, darling. Sleep well?" "Yeah, just tired," Liam muttered, sitting down at the table, his thoughts still far away. She placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, her eyes narrowing slightly as she observed his distracted expression. "You okay? You seem off today." Liam hesitated for a moment. Should he tell her? Should he be honest about what had happened? But he wasn't sure how to start, and his stomach churned with the thought of her reaction. "I'm fine, Mom," he said, forcing a smile. "Just worried about stuff, you know? Things with the bills and everything." His mother's expression softened. She set a glass of orange juice down next to him. "I know, Liam. It's been tough lately, but we'll figure it out. We always do." Liam nodded, but the words didn't ease the tightness in his chest. As much as he wanted to believe that everything would work out, the reality was that they were running out of time. The rent was overdue, and the landlord's patience was wearing thin. No matter how many times they told themselves that they could make it through, the truth was hard to ignore. They were falling behind, and Liam could feel the weight of their situation pressing in on him from all sides. His phone buzzed on the table, interrupting his thoughts. Liam glanced down at the screen, his heart skipping a beat. It was a message from John. "Liam, I've spoken with a few people I know, and I'm happy to help. I'll cover the rent this month. Don't worry about it." The relief that washed over Liam was instant, like a floodgate opening. He read the message again, his fingers trembling as he replied, "Thank you, John. I don't know what to say. He felt a lump in his throat, the weight of everything he had been carrying for so long finally beginning to lift. But as the relief set in, the worry returned. He couldn't keep this from his mother. She needed to know. But how would she react? He knew she'd be upset, furious, even. But there was no turning back now. Liam glanced up at his mother, who was still busy in the kitchen, her back to him. The decision weighed heavily on him. How could he tell her? How could he explain that someone else, someone outside of their small circle, was going to pay their rent? He took a deep breath, knowing there was no easy way to say this. "Mom," he said slowly, his voice betraying the nerves in his chest. We're getting help with the rent. From someone outside of the family." His mother froze, her hand hovering over the stove, as if time itself had come to a halt. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What do you mean, Liam?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp. "Help? Who's helping us?" Liam swallowed hard. "John," he said, watching her closely. "John Walker. He's the man I met a few days ago, the one I helped with the groceries. He offered to cover the rent for this month." The tension in the small kitchen was thick as Liam waited for his mother's response. He had just told her about John's offer, and the silence that followed was heavier than he had anticipated. His mother stood still, her hands gripping the edge of the counter, her face hardening as she processed what he had just said. Liam's heart raced. He had hoped she would understand, perhaps even appreciate the relief this could bring. But now, seeing her reaction, he was starting to feel the weight of his decision. He had been so certain in the moment, but in that instant, all of his certainties seemed to crumble. I don't know what you're thinking, Liam," his mother said, her voice low and tight. "You know how I feel about this." Liam shifted uncomfortably. "I know, Mom, but we don't have a choice anymore. We can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. The rent is overdue. The landlord is getting impatient. We can't afford it. John is just trying to help." His mother's jaw clenched, her nostrils flaring as she turned to face him. "Help?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Is that what you call this? Charity? I don't want anyone's pity, Liam. I don't need anyone to rescue us." Liam stepped forward, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's not charity, Mom. It's just help. He's offering to cover the rent for us this month, so we don't lose the house. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, but I thought—" "You thought?" His mother cut him off, her words sharp. "You think you can just accept help from some stranger without consulting me first? This isn't just about us, Liam. This is about our dignity, our pride. What will people think if they find out that we had to rely on someone else to stay afloat?" Liam felt a wave of frustration surge through him. "I'm not worried about what other people think, Mom. I'm worried about us. You don't understand how hard it's been. The stress is killing me. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I don't want to lose this house. I don't want us to lose everything we've worked for." His mother's face softened for just a moment, but the tension in her posture remained. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see how hard you're working to keep us afloat? But Liam, there are some lines you don't cross. Some things you don't do. Taking handouts, taking help when we can't give anything back. That's not the way we do things. It's not how I raised you." Liam opened his mouth to protest, but his mother continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You're a man now, Liam. You're not a child anymore. You can't just rely on other people to fix things for you. I won't let you do that. I won't let us be reduced to beggars, accepting help from strangers when we should be taking care of ourselves." Liam's anger flared. "This isn't about pride. This is about survival. Do you really think I want to accept help from a stranger? Do you think I like the idea of someone else paying our bills? But what other choice do we have, Mom? I don't know what else to do. I'm scared. I'm scared that we're going to lose everything we've worked so hard for." His mother's face hardened again, and Liam saw the familiar stubbornness in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she wouldn't back down from an argument. The same look she had when she was determined to protect him, even if it meant pushing him away. "No, Liam," she said, her voice firm. "You don't get it. We don't rely on others. We don't let them decide our fate. We decide. And I'm not going to let some man pay our rent, even if his intentions are good. I don't want to owe him anything. Liam felt his chest tighten. He had hoped that his mother would understand, that she would see how much this offer meant. But instead, all he saw was her pride. A pride that, at that moment, seemed more important to her than their survival. "Mom, you're not listening to me," he said, his voice shaking with frustration. "This isn't about owing anyone anything. It's about getting by. It's about making sure we're okay. We can pay him back. We can figure it out. But right now, we need this. We need this help, and I don't care what anyone thinks." "You think I don't know that?" His mother's voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, Liam saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I know we're struggling, but I won't let us fall so low that we have to beg for charity. I won't let that happen." Liam took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Mom, please. Just think about it. We're not begging. We're not asking for a handout. We're accepting help because we don't have any other option right now. If we don't do something, we could lose everything." For a long moment, his mother didn't say anything. She stood there, silent, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if to shield herself from the pain of what he was asking her to do. Liam's heart pounded as he waited for her to respond, but the silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Finally, his mother spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't, Liam. I can't. It's not right." Liam closed his eyes for a moment, his hands shaking with frustration. He had thought that by telling her, by making her see how much they needed help, she would come around. But now, it seemed that she was as entrenched in her beliefs as ever. "Fine," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll handle it on my own. I'll figure it out." He turned and walked out of the kitchen, his mind racing. He had expected resistance, but not like this. He had expected his mother to understand, to see the practicality of it, but instead, all he felt now was the weight of her rejection. He couldn't force her to accept help, but he didn't know what else to do. What if they lost everything because of her pride? What if he couldn't protect them on his own? Liam slumped onto the couch in the living room, feeling the overwhelming weight of the world on his shoulders. This wasn't just about rent anymore. It was about the gap between his mother's pride and his desperation. It was about the differences between the way she had raised him and the way the world was now pressing in on them. And as much as he wanted to respect her wishes, Liam couldn't help but wonder. Was his mother's pride worth their future? The next few days were tense, with the heavy silence hanging over the house. Liam did his best to stay busy, trying to keep his mind off the mounting stress. He had hoped that, over time, his mother would come to see the situation differently, but he wasn't sure if that would happen. The argument still echoed in his mind, the words of rejection cutting deeper than he had expected. His mother, meanwhile, had retreated into herself, keeping to her routines as if nothing had changed. She continued to cook and clean, and at night, she would sit in her favorite chair, staring out the window, lost in thought. Liam could see the strain in her eyes, the worry that had always been there, but now seemed more pronounced. She hadn't spoken much since the argument, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she was fighting a battle inside herself. It was late one evening when he found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped together, her eyes distant. Liam hesitated at the door, unsure if he should approach her, but something in her posture told him that she wasn't angry anymore. She looked exhausted, but there was a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. "Mom," Liam said softly, stepping into the room. "Can we talk?" His mother didn't immediately respond. Instead, she took a deep breath and slowly lifted her gaze to meet his. Her face was tired, but there was something else there, something that made Liam pause, waiting for her to speak. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and about John." She hesitated, as if the words were hard to form, but then continued. "I've never been good at asking for help, Liam. You know that. I've always tried to do everything on my own. I thought that if I accepted help, it would mean I was failing, that I couldn't take care of you the way I promised your father I would." Liam's heart tightened at the mention of his father. He knew how much she had struggled after his father passed away. She had always tried to be both mother and father to him, shouldering every responsibility without complaint. But the weight had always been there, pressing down on her in ways he hadn't fully understood until now. "I know," Liam said softly, sitting down across from her. "But Mom, this isn't about failing. It's about surviving. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. And I don't want you to feel like you have to carry all the weight alone anymore." His mother sighed, her fingers running along the edge of the table. "I've always believed that if I just worked hard enough, if I just kept going, everything would eventually fall into place. But lately, I don't know. It feels like no matter how hard I try, we're sinking deeper, and I can't keep pretending that I have all the answers." Liam felt a pang of relief. He could hear the struggle in her voice, but also the acceptance that things weren't as simple as she had once believed. He reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "It's okay, Mom. You don't have to do this alone. I don't want you to carry everything by yourself. John just wants to help, that's all. He doesn't expect anything in return." His mother's eyes welled up, and she quickly wiped at the corners of her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't want to be a burden to anyone, but I see now that maybe I've been too proud. I've been so afraid of being vulnerable, of accepting help, because I didn't want to feel weak. I didn't want you to see me like that." Liam squeezed her hand gently, his heart aching with understanding. "You've never been weak, Mom. You've been strong for so long. But that doesn't mean you have to be strong all the time. You're allowed to ask for help. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It doesn't make you any less of a mother." There was a long pause as his mother processed his words. Liam could see the internal battle waging within her. But after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll call John. I'll accept his help. But Liam, this doesn't change how I feel. I'll never be comfortable with it. But for you, for us, I'll do it." Liam felt a wave of relief wash over him. A part of him had been afraid that his mother would never come around, that she would remain entrenched in her pride. But hearing her voice now, hearing the vulnerability she had been holding back, made him realize how much she loved him and how much she was willing to sacrifice for him. "I'm so grateful, Mom," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." His mother smiled, though it was small and bittersweet. "I hope you know how much I wish I could do more for you, Liam. I hope you know how much I want to protect you. But sometimes, we have to accept help, even if it's hard." Liam nodded. "I know, and I'll always be here for you, too. We're in this together." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation settling between them. It wasn't easy for his mother to admit that she needed help, but she had done it. She had let go of the pride that had kept her from accepting assistance for so long, and in doing so, she had shown Liam just how deep her love for him really was. That night, after they had spoken, Liam found his mother in the living room, on the phone with John. He couldn't hear the exact words, but he could tell from the way his mother was speaking that she was still uncomfortable, still unsure of herself. But she had done it. She had reached out. She had taken the first step. As Liam lay in bed that night, a feeling of gratitude washed over him. Things weren't fixed yet, and they still had a long way to go. But for the first time in a long while, Liam felt a glimmer of hope. They had been facing so much uncertainty, so much fear. But now, with John's help, maybe they could find their way through the storm. And as he drifted off to sleep, he knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. As the days turned into weeks, Liam's family began to breathe a little easier. The rent had been paid, and the weight of that immediate worry had lifted from their shoulders. But John's help didn't stop there. Slowly, without fanfare or expectation, John began to offer more than just financial assistance. He became a steady presence in their lives, a friend who genuinely cared about their future. One afternoon, Liam sat at the kitchen table, looking over some bills when his phone buzzed. It was a message from John. "Hey, Liam, I've been thinking, how about we sit down and talk about your family's finances? I know a thing or two about managing money. Maybe I can help you both plan for the future." Liam stared at the message for a moment, his mind racing. He'd always thought of finances as something that just needed to be scraped by with, never really understanding how to plan or budget effectively. But the idea of learning from John, who had offered so much help already, seemed like a lifeline. That evening, Liam and his mother met John at his house. They sat in his cozy living room, the warmth of the fireplace adding a touch of comfort to what could have been a stressful conversation. John had prepared some materials, a simple spreadsheet, a list of budgeting tips, and even a few worksheets on saving money. "I know it's not glamorous," John said with a smile, "but understanding how to manage your money will give you the freedom to make better decisions. It'll take time, but you'll feel more in control, and that's important." Liam's mother, who had always been reluctant to admit her financial struggles, seemed to open up more than ever. "I've never been good at this," she confessed. "I've always just worked hard and hoped the bills would get paid somehow. But there's always been so much uncertainty. I've never thought about planning for the future." John nodded thoughtfully. "It's never too late to start. Everyone's financial journey looks different. But with the right steps, you can build something stable. And stability gives you peace of mind." Over the next few weeks, John continued to meet with them. He patiently walked them through different methods of budgeting, explained how credit worked, and taught them about savings and investments, always in a way that was easy to understand. Slowly, Liam's mother began to see the light. The fear that had once clouded her vision started to fade, replaced by a sense of empowerment as she learned the tools to better manage her money. But John didn't stop there. One day, he invited Liam's mother out for coffee, suggesting that they discuss a potential job opportunity. "You've got so many skills," John said. "Maybe it's time to put them to work in a different way, something that pays more consistently." At first, Liam's mother hesitated. She had been working at her current job for years, but it was a low-paying position with few benefits. She had always been afraid to leave it behind, unsure of her ability to find something better. "I don't know," she said, looking unsure. "I'm too old to start over, and I don't know if anyone would hire me." John reassured her. "You've got experience, and you've got a lot of heart. There are people out there who would be lucky to have you. It's not about age. It's about what you bring to the table. Let me help you find something." With John's encouragement, Liam's mother agreed to start looking for a new job. John helped her update her resume, coached her on interview skills, and even reached out to some of his own contacts in the community. It wasn't long before she was offered a position at a local retail store, one that paid much better than her previous job and had benefits she had never dreamed of. The news was a turning point for Liam's family. Not only had they received the help they needed to get through the tough times, but they had also gained the knowledge and confidence to start rebuilding. With a steadier income, Liam's mother no longer felt the overwhelming pressure that had once consumed her. She could look ahead, see possibilities instead of roadblocks, and finally feel like she was taking control of her future. The relationship between John and Liam's family grew stronger with each passing day. What had started as a one-time offer of assistance had blossomed into something much more meaningful. John was no longer just a benefactor or a source of advice. He had become a true friend. John began to visit more regularly, not just to offer help, but to spend time with them, to chat and laugh like old friends. Liam's mother would invite him over for dinner, and they would talk about everything, from their day-to-day lives to deeper, more personal matters. There was a warmth between them now, a comfort that only true friendship can create. For Liam, seeing his mother thrive in a way she hadn't in years was a blessing. He had always known her to be strong, but now he saw a new strength in her, a quiet resilience that came from not just surviving but thriving. She wasn't just going through the motions of life anymore. She was living it, with intention and hope for the future. John, too, seemed to find joy in their friendship. He had no family of his own, and his involvement in Liam's life had brought him a sense of purpose that he hadn't realized he was missing. He had always been the one to give advice, to lend a hand. But this was different. This wasn't just charity. It was a bond, a mutual respect that had grown organically over time. "I'm proud of you," John said one evening, after Liam's mother had signed her new job contract. "You've come a long way. You've learned a lot, and you've shown a lot of courage." Liam's mother smiled softly, feeling a mix of gratitude and pride. "It wasn't easy, but with your help and Liam's, I feel like I can finally start fresh." Liam looked at the two of them, at the bond they had formed, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. not just for the financial help or the practical advice, but for the way John had become part of their family. He had given them more than just a handout. He had given them hope, a sense of belonging, and a friendship that could weather any storm. And in that moment, Liam realized that this was the greatest gift of all. Liam sat quietly on the porch, his gaze lost in the early evening sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change, and now, with their lives slowly settling into a rhythm, he couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. From the day he first met John to the pivotal moment when his mother had finally accepted help, it felt as though he and his family had crossed an ocean of doubt and uncertainty. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were learning how to live again. He thought back to the long nights when he would lie awake, listening to the sound of his mother's quiet sobs, knowing she was worried about their next meal or the rent that seemed impossible to pay. Liam had tried his best to be strong, but he was just a kid. How could he shoulder the weight of their future on his own? In those moments, he had often felt powerless, trapped in a life that seemed to offer no escape. But now, everything felt different. Liam had learned so much in the months since meeting John. He had learned the importance of resilience, the ability to rise up when life knocks you down. John had shown him that resilience wasn't just about toughing it out or pretending that everything was okay. It was about accepting the pain and struggle, acknowledging the challenges, and then finding the strength to keep going, no matter how hard it got. Liam had seen that in his mother, the way she had fought for years to keep their family afloat, even when it seemed like the odds were stacked against them. It was her quiet strength, her refusal to give up, that had inspired him to push forward, even in the darkest of times. But it wasn't just about resilience. Liam had also learned about independence, what it really meant to stand on his own 2 feet. He had always thought of himself as independent, but he now understood that true independence wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about recognizing when you needed help and having the courage to ask for it. It was about knowing that you didn't have to carry the burden by yourself, that there were people who cared and would support you through tough times. And sometimes, asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of wisdom. His mother had learned this lesson as well. Liam couldn't help but admire her. For so long, she had been determined to handle everything on her own, convinced that accepting help would mean admitting defeat. She had been so proud, so unwilling to let anyone see her struggle. But when John had offered to pay their rent, when he had reached out with no expectation of anything in return, it had shaken her worldview. It had taken her time, but eventually, she had realized that accepting help didn't diminish her strength, it enhanced it. It showed her that there was wisdom in vulnerability, and that sometimes allowing others to lend a hand could open the door to greater possibilities. The change in her was subtle at first, but Liam had noticed it. The tension that had once clenched her jaw was now gone. Her shoulders, which had always carried the weight of the world, seemed lighter. She smiled more, and her laughter was no longer a rare sound. She had learned to trust again, to open herself up to the kindness of others, and that made all the difference. Together, Liam and his mother had begun to rebuild their lives. The stability that had once seemed so elusive was now within their reach. Liam's mother had started her new job, and the paychecks had begun to come in regularly. They could finally pay their bills without anxiety. No longer did they have to worry about eviction, or whether they could make it through the month. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was theirs, and they were taking ownership of it. As Liam watched his mother prepare dinner that evening, he felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. It was a simple, everyday moment, yet it was so much more. It was a symbol of their progress, of the new life they were creating. They were no longer in a constant state of survival. They had moved from a place of desperation to a place of stability, and with that stability came the freedom to dream again. For the first time in a long time, Liam allowed himself to think about the future. Not the bleak future of uncertainty that had once haunted him, but a future full of potential. He dreamed about going to college, about finding a career that he loved, about traveling and exploring the world. He dreamed of a future where his family could live comfortably, where his mother could finally relax and enjoy the fruits of her hard work. The lessons they had learned, the growth they had experienced, were not just about overcoming obstacles. They were about becoming the people they were meant to be. It was about understanding that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, truly living. And for Liam and his mother, they were finally living again. As he stood up from the porch and walked inside, Liam knew that this chapter of their lives was only the beginning. They still had a long road ahead of them, but now they faced it with confidence. They had learned the true meaning of resilience, independence, and humility, and with those lessons, they were ready to face whatever came next. Liam looked at his mother, who was now smiling as she set the table. He smiled back, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would be okay. They had each other, and that was enough. As the days rolled by, Liam and his mother found themselves in a place they hadn't thought possible just months earlier, a place of hope, peace, and quiet resilience. The small apartment they called home no longer felt like a constant reminder of their struggle, but rather a symbol of their newfound strength. There were no longer late-night conversations about overdue bills, no whispered worries about what tomorrow might bring. Now, the house was filled with laughter, and their mornings began with the simple pleasure of knowing they could face another day without the weight of their past anxieties bearing down on them. Liam watched as his mother prepared breakfast in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. It was a sound that had been absent for so long, drowned out by the noise of worry and fear. But now, it was a sound that filled him with hope, the quiet melody of someone who had learned to embrace the beauty of the present, no matter how difficult the past had been. He stood in the doorway, watching her as she worked. She moved with a new sense of purpose, a new lightness in her step, as if a burden had been lifted. Liam had always admired his mother. She was strong, perhaps stronger than anyone else he knew, but for a long time, her strength had been weighed down by the constant pressure of their financial struggles. Yet, through it all, she had never shown weakness. She had kept them afloat, and even when everything seemed to be falling apart, she held on to the belief that they would somehow make it through. And now, Liam could see the payoff of her determination. As he sat down at the table, he realized just how far they had come. There were still challenges to face. Life was never without its hurdles, but there was a sense of peace that had settled in their hearts. The future didn't seem as daunting as it once had. It felt like something they could shape together, something they could navigate with the lessons they had learned. Liam's thoughts turned to John. He thought about the man who had been a quiet beacon of kindness in their lives, someone who had come into their world without fanfare or expectation, and yet had changed everything. John had not only offered financial help but had given them something even more valuable: his trust, his friendship, and the wisdom to understand that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but a courageous act of strength. It was a gift they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Liam and his mother had learned a powerful lesson from John. That life wasn't about doing everything alone. It wasn't about proving how tough you could be, how much you could handle on your own. No, true strength lay in the ability to recognize when you needed support and the courage to accept it. It was about vulnerability, about acknowledging that we are all interconnected, and that sometimes the greatest act of strength is not doing it all yourself, but trusting others to help. This lesson had changed not only how they viewed their relationship with others, but also how they viewed themselves. They no longer saw themselves as helpless or weak, but as people who were worthy of care, people who could lean on others when the road became too hard to travel alone. This understanding had lifted a weight from their shoulders, allowing them to breathe freely for the first time in years. Looking toward the future, Liam felt a deep sense of gratitude for what they had gained on this journey. It wasn't just the financial stability or the relief from their past struggles. It was the emotional growth, the change in perspective, the newfound understanding that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, truly living. It was about choosing to face each day with an open heart, even when the world around you was uncertain. And that was something Liam would carry with him for the rest of his life. As he looked at his mother, he knew they were ready to embrace whatever came next. They had learned how to fight for what they wanted, how to weather the storms, and most importantly, how to allow others to help them along the way. They had learned that there was strength in both independence and interdependence, that the key to a fulfilling life lay not in isolation, but in connection. For Liam, this was just the beginning. He knew that the future held its own set of challenges, but he no longer feared them. He had the tools to face whatever came his way. He had learned that resilience was not about enduring pain in silence, but about having the courage to ask for help when needed, to stand tall even in moments of vulnerability. He had learned that true strength wasn't about doing it all alone, but about standing together with the people who cared for you. Liam's mother, too, had grown. She had found a new purpose, a new understanding of herself. She had come to realize that asking for help didn't diminish her ability to provide for her family. It enhanced her strength, made her more capable of taking care of the ones she loved. She had learned that sometimes it took more courage to accept help than to fight on alone. Together, they had learned that hardship wasn't the end of the road. It was just part of the journey. And with the lessons they had gained along the way, Liam and his mother were more prepared than ever to face whatever the future held. They were no longer shackled by fear or uncertainty. They were free to dream, to hope, and to build a future that was truly their own. As the day drew to a close and the quiet peace of the evening settled around them, Liam sat with his mother and thought about the long road that had led them here. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for John, who had been a guiding light when they needed it most, but for everything they had learned about themselves and each other. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. And so, as they looked toward the future, Liam knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they were ready. Together, they would face the world with renewed hope, with the strength that came from within and from those who cared for them. Their journey was far from over, but now, it was a journey they would walk with faith, courage, and a deep appreciation for the power of connection. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about living fully, with love, humility, and the knowledge that, no matter what life threw their way, they could handle it. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. Your support means the world. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming inspiring tales. We look forward to sharing more stories with you soon.